When you have optimized vitamin D levels, you will reduce your risk of almost every disease that you can think of. They'll let people die in the hospitals in Canada and crucify a doctor for trying to do the right things and knowing a little bit about cellular physiology. We've got to get off the carbohydrate roller coaster. We are all eating too much bread, too much pasta, too much flour, too much sugar. And that roller coaster is killing us. The great thing about Florida is you can get rid of about half the geniuses and double the number of people that be considered mentally handicapped just by shifting that bell curve, that 3 to 9 IQ points that you get by giving kids lots of fluoride in their water. But a lot of people start on programs that work and then they stop, and 3 months later they're right back where they started because the source of the poison is their own cells, which have been genetically invaded.
So tyranny and compliance in the face of tyranny. You know, the truth is, if no one complied with tyranny, the tyrant would just scream by himself in the woods and it would go nowhere. So when you comply, you are the lubricant that keeps that tyrannical train rolling. So really learning to say no and just stepping back and saying, wow, you know what? I have the right to individual sovereignty. I'm not going to play along. That's really the message that a lot of us in the movement just really internalized and then pushed back with. Just no, I do not comply. It's that simple. One of the interesting points that I think really needs to be made is that the COVID era has been a great litmus test for not only ourselves, but people in our immediate families and our doctors. Over lunch, I had a discussion with a gentleman who said his doctor is still wearing a mask. So my message is simple. Exactly. Fire your doctor and find one who's sane, right? Because at this point, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem, and that's the reality. And we see how slow government is to respond to the threat of where we are today, which is dealing with long COVID, the long vax issues. And so we really have to support the organizations and the people who are really working on solutions, because the government is just finally admitting harms to the shots. Well, we knew they were harmful and deadly as soon as they rolled out. And, you know, that's 5 years ago at this point. So if we wait for them to find solutions, that could be another 5 years, which is just completely unacceptable. So with all that being said, the message is very simple. And the next gentleman, Dr. Trozzi, I believe received probably the highest honor of the era. And that is, he was told by the Canadian government that he is ungovernable. We need more of that. Dr. Mark Trozzi has practiced emergency medicine in Canada for 27 years and taught critical resuscitation, advanced trauma care for a decade, and held teaching positions at 3 Canadian medical schools. He's a medical advisor to many health and human rights organizations, an international steering committee member of World Council for Health, co-chair of the World Council for Health and Science Committee, serves the World Council for Health Research, Ethics, and Integrity Committee, co-founder with Dr. Villa of World Council for Health Americas, and the founder of World Council for Health Canada. Clearly, he is all in, and we thank him for that. He's been awarded the 2023 Medical Heroism Award from LifeSite News and the 2025 National Braveheart Freedom Award from Living Streams Institute. Much of his work can be found on drtrozzi.news and worldcouncilforhealth.org. Welcome, Dr. Mark Trozzi.
No, thank you very much. What a pleasure it is as a doctor from a region we used to refer to as Canada, north of the 49th parallel, to be in Florida at this time. And by the way, Canada will not be the 51st state. We're going to form multiple republics, and then those republics will join the states. But I think we're at least good for 3 to 5. It's a pretty big place, and we have lots of minerals to share. I think that my colleagues this morning have done a phenomenal job. And, you know, I think of Dr. Ziviet's presentation. This is very hard, heavy reality. And I just want to make sure before we get started, is there anybody who would like a COVID booster today or a flu shot? Okay, so I know who I'm speaking with. So once again, I want to thank you for having me. And again, it's for the team here from Canada. We've been living behind enemy lines, and right now we are between the lines of one of the first regions in the world that has been wrestled to a significant degree out of the hands of the globalist murderers. And so it's a real pleasure, and I feel a lot safer here than I do in my own hometown. And if I could just mention one more thing, when you watch that circus north of the 49th parallel, this is not Canadians. We are not Trudeau. We are not Carney. We're people who love one another. We love our neighbors. So please don't hold us against us any more than you would hold the Nazi period over the Austria. They were occupied, and that's where we are. So God bless America. And I got an easy job. Thank you. I got an easy job. I don't know, was anyone here in January when I had the honor to speak previously? And at that time, I talked about mechanisms of injury. And it was kind of a lot of scientific details. And I think this morning, Dr. Zhiviets just took that ball and hit it right out of the park. So I've got a fun job today. I want to talk to you about two things. And a lot of these things, some of you say, well, I know that. Well, great, me too. And this is to remind us and fill in some of the blanks on how do we stay healthy? Okay, we know that injecting ourselves with genetic, pegylated nanoparticles is not a good idea. But what are the foundations of immune system health and health? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to talk about some of the basics and give you a little bit of advice what to do for the injured and for those of us who are all, to some degree or another, victims of shedding of the products from these biological weapons. So foundations of health and immunity. I got to give credit to an American group of internal medicine physicians who came up with this years ago, long before COVID. And it was the first thing I wrote at Grand Rounds in my hospital on the board in about March 2020, said, this is what we do, right? If you don't have an immune system, you won't survive. It doesn't matter what infection, it doesn't matter what antibiotics or whatever you get, without an immune system, you'll die. And I think Dr. Villa is going to speak to the situation quite clearly. So how do you run a healthy immune system? And I want you to remember this, new start. If you can remember new start, and you could every day say, hey, how am I going to keep my immune system healthy? Or say, hey, what can I do for my kids so they have a healthy immune system? And as you guys all pointed out, it's not injecting them with foreign particles, as Dr. Tenpenny said. So N is for nutrition. E is for exercise. W is for water. S for sunshine. T is for temperance, otherwise known as good habits. A is for air. R is for rest. And T is trust for God. So if you say to yourself in the morning, say, I want to have a great immune system, so I'm going to do the new start. I'm going to think about nutrition, exercise, hydration, sunshine, temperance, fresh air, rest, and I'm going to trust God. So nutrition, this could be a huge subject. And I'm sure there are people, are there any people who are on a carnivore diet in the room? And are there any people who are on a vegan diet in the room? Okay. And what this demonstrates is you will meet some very healthy people on a carnivore diet. You will meet very healthy people on a paleo diet. You'll meet healthy people on a vegan diet. The bottom line is put some thought into what you put in your mouth. Don't take it for granted. So I just want to give you some really quick tips. First of all, we've got to get off the carbohydrate roller coaster. We are all eating too much bread, too much pasta, too much flour, too much sugar. And that roller coaster is killing us. So do you know all the middle aisles in the grocery store where you find all those box foods? You don't want to spend much time there. The outside aisles, you'll find things that look like food. They're plants, they're vegetables, they're fruit, they're nuts, there's eggs, there's meat, there's cheese, there's yogurt. There's a lot of things you can eat that are actually food. So there's no reason to eat synthetic food. Another thing, I think RFK very accurately has pointed out, seed oils. You really have to think of eating the right oils. It's one thing to be cooking your food in canola oil, and it's another thing to be cooking it in coconut oil. So, these are some of the key things. And another thing we don't do enough of is stay hungry, right? You go back, think back in our ancestors. You're hungry and you worked for it. You ran around hunting a deer or trying to catch fish or whatever, climbing trees to get mangoes. You spent time hungry. Now we live in a world where if you're driving down the road, oh, Tim Hortons, grab a donut. Oh, I'm 20 feet from the fridge. I think, come to think of it, I'm not completely crammed to the lid. I'll go eat something. So we have to use discipline. We need to spend time hungry. And we're going to talk about that more later. So think about nutrition, exercise. This is big. You can't get away from the value of moving your body. Any of you guys a little older like me? I'm 60. Okay? All right. So I didn't know. Come on. You know, 30 years ago, I would put hundreds of pounds on my shoulders and squat and bench and all this stuff. And that was an appropriate exercise then. That's not the way I exercise now, right? So at all stages of life, there is the importance of being physically active, moving your body, doing exercise. Find something that's fun. Like I love swimming. I could swim all day. Kick me out of a boat and I'll be glad to watch the boat leave because I could swim until somebody rescues me. This is great. If you like splitting wood, if you like doing Tai Chi, canoeing, if you're young and you're pumping iron and climbing mountains and running marathons, great. But no matter what age you are, no matter where you are in life, no matter if you've got one leg or two, exercise is foundational to health. Exercise is foundational to a good immune system. Water. Would anybody like some extra fluoride today in their water? No, me neither. Although the great thing about fluoride is you can get rid of about half the geniuses and double the number of people that be considered mentally handicapped just by shifting that bell curve, that 3 to 9 IQ points that you get by giving kids lots of fluoride in their water. So yeah, you've got to choose your water well. But our body is a stream. We're flowing, right? You take water in, you take water out, you rehydrate your cells. And just like the part of our body that's membranes is made of oils, a lot of our body's made of water. And the more you flush your system, it's very hard to overdose on water. It can be done, but it's hard. You basically got to put a tube down somebody's throat and pour a 50-gallon jug in. So stay well hydrated. Drink at least 2 or 3 liters a day of good water. We're going to talk about fasting later. And a really good habit in the morning is when you get up, the first thing to ingest is coffee and no, wait, that was before, is water. Drink a liter of water. As soon as you start your day, stay well hydrated. One of the side effects of drinking a lot of water is you have to pee. And so the cure for that is having access to a bathroom, or for the fellas, out behind a tree somewhere. Sunshine and vitamin D. There's a lot of benefits to sunshine, but the biggest one is vitamin D. We're going to talk more about some of the details of vitamin D at the end of my talk, but it's really a miraculous thing. Cholesterol. By the way, cholesterol is not a poison, it's a nutrient. A slight metabolite of cholesterol in your skin, under the action of the sunlight, converts it to vitamin D, the first step in that. Then your liver activates it, and then you basically have this amazing molecule which goes way beyond a vitamin. It's really a hormone or a pro-hormone. And we were taught in med school that your kidneys use it to communicate to your parathyroid glands to keep calcium levels reasonable so your bones don't go soft. And that's true. And we were told you need about 400 units a day to do that. And that's true. But guess what else? It's a key communication molecule in so many systems in the body, including the immune system. So we need a lot more than that. If anybody's interested, please search vitamin D on my website. You'll find out some fascinating things, including a free textbook. But we need a lot more vitamin D, and most of the time, especially in Canada, you're not going to do a very good job sunbathing out in a snowbank, right? Even in the summer, even in good weather, you need to be out in good sun when your shadow is shorter than your body, which means the sun's high enough overhead. So if you're not getting 20 minutes of that a day, you probably need vitamin D supplementation, and you probably need a lot more than you've been told. I take 10,000 units a day, and that keeps me just at the right level, and we'll talk about those levels later. Temperance. Now, I wish I could have got a better slide, because no bad habit sounds a little harsh, you know. Temperance is key to immune system health. It's one of these key 8 factors. Temperance means that if you're going to have a drink, have a drink. Smoking cigarettes, if you're smoking cigarettes, get help. One of the easiest ways to quit smoking, Dr. Zhiviets told me, he knows a lot about stuff. He told me earlier that if you don't put the cigarette in your mouth or light the end of it, you've pretty much quit smoking. So that's one way to go, but there's other forms, hypnosis and all sorts of things you can try. Fresh air. Does anyone notice a difference when you're in the woods compared to downtown New York breathing? It's because the air is different. It's very different. You know, you have a lot of negatively charged ions, which are really good for your health, whereas with the smog and the city air, you have a lot of positively charged ions. And though I would agree that the carbon dioxide climate change is a hoax to get everyone to lock ourselves in a box. It's still nice to keep the air fresh. So save a little money in your pocket, maybe do a little carpooling, try to clean up the air in your city, not for Klaus Schwab, but for your grandkids. Rest. I mean, you guys are going, come on, you just stole all this from your grandmother. Yeah, I did. I did. Because she was smart. Rest is essential, you know, and everyone needs certain different amounts of sleep, right? I need a higher amount of sleep than others. Doesn't mean I'm lazy. It just means if I don't get like 9 hours sleep on a regular basis, I can feel it. I fall apart. Some people, 6 hours and they're good and they've done it for years. But you don't want to live in sleep denial. There's something to be said for an afternoon nap, especially if you get a little older like me. Let yourself have rest. Fight the war, but when you trust in God, you can also pause and rest, right? A wise woman from the town I grew up in, and oh boy, she taught me a lot of brilliant things. And she talked about the power of being thankful. She said, Mark, I don't ask for anything when I talk to God anymore. I just start thanking him, and it engages the whole process. And another thing she taught me, and I'm sure you've heard it in a church nearby you, or maybe even a mosque, which is, you know, there's a point where you say, God, I've done what I can do. I'm handing it to you. I'll wake up tomorrow and do your will. And that helps you sleep, right? Remember, our boss, he may not wear scary costumes, but he's way more powerful than their boss. Okay, so let's get on to this subject, what we've been talking about. And, you know, the vaccines is in quotes, and I'm so glad to hear after years. The first thing I published when I entered this fight at the end of 2020 was a simple video said, this is not a vaccine. The ingredients revealed that. So please don't call it a vaccine. If you do, please go like that, a vaccine. Otherwise, we're giving into their language. We're giving into their lies. Dr. Joseph Sansone is in the house, and you know, when hear everyone talking about the bioweapons, there he is right there. He's really been leading a charge to have these bioweapons dealt with as the crimes that they are. And briefly on that subject, I want to mention, there's a lot of people in government who have, a good people, who have a serious problem. Because if a government says, even though it was previous administration, says, yeah, these shots are killing people, they've caused cancers, that's why your kids die, that's why your grandma died, that's why you can't move your legs, that's why you can't remember where you're going. Well, the liability would bankrupt the government, right? So where does the money come back? So do we just live in denial? I'm not good with that. So where does the money come from? The people that did this, right? There's no indemnity for crimes. That was mentioned by an earlier speaker. And so we really need to prosecute the criminals that did this. We need to take all their assets. And that's how we deal with the damages, not draining the people of Florida to treat their own injuries. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the main things. Fasting increases autophagy. Autophagy is something happening in your body all the time, which is getting rid of old junk, getting rid of spike proteins, old degraded proteins, cells that have become useless. A lot like if you have a plant in the kitchen, you take off the dying leaves to save the other ones. And fasting is a great way. A really great way to fast is intermittent fasting. Eat all your food in a 6 to 8 hour window. You can have a black coffee, black tea, water, things like that in the other hours, but no carbohydrates during that other than that 6 to 8 hour windows. There's special considerations for women. You can find this stuff on my site. I don't want to chew out too much time, but women of reproductive age need to vary that window a little bit through their cycle. And occasionally, a 3-day water fast has tremendous effects, essentially resetting the immune system. There's a reason people have fasted to treat cancer for centuries and things like that. So fasting is a really key way to increase the rate at which your body's getting rid of those toxic spike proteins that are produced as a result of the genetic invasion. Nattokinase is an enzyme. It's derived from a natural Chinese fermented soybean product. It's used traditionally to treat heart disease. It helps break down blood clots. It also helps break down spike proteins. And so that is a very useful supplement to take. It's affordable. Bromelain is another natural enzyme derived from pineapples, and it also helps break down that spike protein as well as other random proteins Dr. spoke about earlier. N-acetylcysteine, a powerful antioxidant, helps block the spike protein from binding to the ACE2 receptor where it engages cells and causes its harm. And it's also a powerful anti-inflammatory to deal with the wild inflammation in the injection victims' bodies. Curcumin, derived from turmeric, also very powerful antiviral, anti-inflammatory, antifibrotic. And if you augment it with piperine, derived from pepper, you have a real powerful combination in that way. In terms of drugs, I'm going to talk about two. Ivermectin, a phenomenal drug. Crazy people take their horse's medicine and try to treat COVID with it. No, wait a minute. Sorry. Ivermectin is a phenomenal drug, and it really is. It does so many good things, from helping with cancer, helping with parasites, helping with viruses, treats COVID, sequesters that spike protein. So even for people who have been genetically invaded with the shot and they're poisoning their body with the spike protein, it sequesters it so it can't do as much damage. Hydroxychloroquine is becoming a very important drug, and it's strange, this one too, because this came up as part of the treatment. It makes sense. It helps get zinc into cells. It helps treat coronavirus infections, but it's also a very safe, old drug for treating autoimmune conditions, and we're dealing with a lot of autoimmune conditions now among the injection injured. Now, what about shedding? Or I'm going to correct myself, thank you, Dr. Tenpenny, and not use the term shedding. I'm going to call it transfection or something of that sort. But for sure, people are giving off spike protein and perhaps other things. We're still figuring out what to do. We're still figuring out what's going on. Remember, we didn't make the bioweapon. We're figuring it out, and in most countries, locked out of our labs to do it. But like one formula we've been working with is, you know, if you're going to be around other people, people you love who've been injected, who've been assaulted, who've been lied to, taking nattokinase, quercetin, ivermectin before, during, after those periods is a great way to protect yourself. We do it when we get on flights and things like that. Vitamin D, I said I'd talk about it more, but I've only got 1 minute, so I'm going to be brief. The levels that most old school doctors think you need to be adequate are far lower than ideal. When you have optimized vitamin D levels, you will reduce your risk of almost every disease that you can think of. That includes coronavirus infections, that includes damage from the jabs, that includes Alzheimer's, heart disease. It goes on and on and on. So get your vitamin D tested and adjust your dose to have optimal levels. How long should people detox for? Well, I think it goes without saying from the previous speakers, possibly for life. Remember, the genetic injection causes the cells to make the poisons. So if someone's been genetically modified to poison their own body, it's kind of hard to deal with the genetic modification. That one is, we're wrapping our heads around that one, and that's a tricky one. But the mechanism of injury involves the spike protein and involves these other proteins. So lifelong detox, or if you're in a place like here, until you can get a blood test and see, hey, I'm actually not making spike protein anymore. I don't have spike protein. You're good to go. But a lot of people start on programs that work, and then they stop, and 3 months later, they're right back where they started, because the source of the poison is their own cells, which have been genetically invaded. There's some tests. You know, honestly, people in Canada, this is what we can give them. I go from town to town and show people what they can do. You live in Florida, and specifically, you live in the villages, which means you have one of the most trusted doctors that I know of in the world to deal with this, and she's sitting right there. And honestly, people, you know, like Dr. Max and myself and others, treating people as best we can through advice with handcuffs on from the government, I say, try these things. And if it's more complex than that, because not the things I've told you are going to help a lot of people, but some people, it doesn't do the trick. And then I say, try to get on an airplane and try to go see Dr. Villa so you can get some tests and some quality stuff. And you get treatments here that you can't give in Canada, like natural things like IV vitamin C, IV glutathione. They'll let people die in the hospitals in Canada and crucify a doctor for trying to do the right things and knowing a little bit about cellular physiology. So you can learn more from Dr. Villa. You can learn more from the World Council for Health. You can learn more on my website, drtrozzi.news, which is also a Substack. When you see this image, you'll come across a great panel we did, including Dr. Villa, myself, and doctors from multiple countries across the continents on the subject. And I appreciate it if you subscribe. You can do it for free. If you choose the paid subscription, well, that'll help us keep fighting the war on the other side of the line. And I promise you, we do it on a shoestring budget. God bless you. God bless America. It's great to be here.